Ferdinand E. Marcos is the 10th president of the Philippines from 1965 to 1986, one of the most controversial leaders of the 20th century. Marcos' rule was famous for its corruption, extravagance, and brutality. Marcos and his wife currently hold the Guinness World Record for the greatest robbery of a government. Marcos' family stole $10 billion from the Central Bank of the Philippines. The People Power Revolution, also known as It's a Revolution, led to the departure of the dictator Ferdinand Marcos, the end of his 20-year leadership and the restoration of democracy in the Philippines. 34 years later since Marcos' reign come to an end, it seems like the view of the people towards him are now changing, from a dictator to a hero. Why did this happen? There's a lot of factors that have been fueling the number of pro-Marcos right now: the upcoming Philippine election, the media representation of Marcos and Aquino, his son Ferdinand Marcos Jr., and nostalgia. Nostalgia is a pleasure of sadness that is caused by remembering something from the past and wishing that you could experience it again, or the state of being homesick. People in the Philippines, especially pro-Marcos, are still longing for the past. They have the desire to experience the so-called golden age or the good old days, where Philippines is one of the most powerful country in Asia, always first in term with innovation and economy. Which is completely false. Yeah, Philippines' economy is already blooming before he became the president. It all started to go down when he was seated. Under the Marcos regime, the country's foreign debt skyrocketed from $599 million in 1966, to $26.7 billion in 1986, or a whopping 45 times increase. Incident of massive corruption tainted these debts. In 1984 and 1985, our gross domestic product contracted to -7.32% and -7.31%, and for the only time in our history, our country defaulted on the payment of its foreign debt. The prices of basic commodities tripled, such that what cost 100 pesos in 1976, went up to as high almost 400 pesos, when the Marcoses left. Nostalgia has long been known not to represent the past but rather the past as we imagine it. The actual detail that time was far from the truth. As we grow more distant from the past, we tend to remember them more positively. This means we don't remember things exactly as they occurred, but with some mental edits that make memory more pleasant. Ferdinand Marcos Jr., son of the late dictator, upon his announcement that he will run as a president, he promised that he will bring back the unifying leadership in the Philippines, and his political campaign slogan is, "Together, we shall rise again." And this is how we see the pattern. Behind the slogan of "Make my country great again," what is actually being said is that a group of countries are not satisfied with their current status and condition and want to change the situation. In other words, not being satisfied with the status quo, these states are preaching revisionism. This is how exactly Trump won in the election. He has convinced his loyal following to cling to the past because it was simpler then, and it gives people a chance to live out that simplicity. For Trump, "Make America Great Again" has not only functioned as a political slogan, it has also morphed into a battle cry for his followers who yearn for a past that has never existed. Pro-Marcos and youth pro-Marcos would argue that, in martial law there were more respect, simple and safe, cause that's what their parents or grandparents told them, and that's how we see the problem. The words that have been interpreted are said by an individual memory, and it was far relative to those memory of the people who suffered in martial law. Memory is the ability to remember information and experience. History is the study of or a record of past events considered together, especially event, of a particular period, country, or subject. Memory and history are very much alike. The only difference between them is that memory is biased and manipulative, especially when emotion is concerned, and history is made by study and documentary. It advances to a hypothesis, and memory doesn't. Growing up, I was taught by my parents that Philippines was really safe during martial law. They used to tell me all the good things that they personally experienced before, but now as I grow older, I came to realize that the world doesn't revolve over our parents' experiences, when there were people that was tortured and killed during the regime, supporting Marcos because he did a lot of things and ignoring the fact that he has tortured and killed a lot of Filipinos is very insensitive, especially to those grieving families until today. The discontentment with the government and the past administration is also one of the reason why the table is now turning to Marcos. We all know that yellow liberals or Aquino is #1 Marcos enemy. After Cory take the seat, the state of the Philippines just got worsened, and they are all blaming them, not overlooking in the destruction of martial law that has been brought to the country. Even now the Philippines are still recovering from it. I don't mean to conceal Cory's regime, cause they also have mistake, but the mistake of the past administration doesn't make Marcos clean. The media representation of Aquino and Marcos is also one of the reason of the increasing number of pro-Marcos. We all told by the media that Marcos was a bad guy and Aquino was a hero, and that's how they began to question the past. If Aquinos were hero, why Philippines just got worsened after Cory became the president? What if things were really good back then, by the power of Marcos YouTubers and Facebook oligarchs and cronies? They managed to gaslight some of the youth. I also observe that some of the pro-Marcos aren't even critical thinkers, they tend to get driven by their emotion on how great Philippines back then. In the age of cyber age and misinformation, we should not trust on what we see on FB or YouTube post. We should search and seek more about martial law, because the dark days of the Philippines, and Marcos' reputation, is widely written in history.